All right. 13 love, 13 knowledge, 13 wisdom, 13 respect. This is your creation 13. I believe I'm live, hopefully. It's always hard to tell. It's like waiting for that small moment and then it's like, boom, you're live. We're going to be talking about spirituality and absorbing burdens, curses, anything that a person um, might give to you. Might give to you. And what do I mean by that? Pretty much like what I was talking about with the laying of hands is how you communicate with people, right? One of the things that I've really noticed throughout the years is a lot of people like to shake my hand, whether I'm helping them out or if they just randomly see me on the street, they want to shake my hand. And I was taught about spiritual energy, right? Christ was teaching me about this. And he was saying that, any kind of contact, because your hands absorb energy and release energy, right? So when you are shaking someone's hand, you are performing an agreement or an exchange of something. An exchange of something. The biggest part is an exchange of energy, right? An exchange of energy. And that was huge for me, right? Learning about that and then just throughout the years, just kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together and then did research on the laying of hands in religion. And I was like, wait a minute here. And the laying of hands in a lot of other spiritual activities, right? Religion always likes to bash yoga, and, and then um, what I learned from yoga is they are stretch practices. Thanks to Diamond Dallas Page from wrestling fame, Hall of Famer, he created DDP Yoga, YRG, and he created that from his ex-wife showing him some of these different things because he had hurt his back real bad. And he thought he was never going to wrestle again. So he ended up going through chiropractors, and just realigning him. And then his ex-wife got him into yoga. He was like, "Oh, yoga, that's boring. I never want to do that." But when he went to these classes, he started something clicking. He was like, "Wait a minute. We got physical therapy and we got yoga. Yoga stretches the ligaments, as does physical therapy." So he put it all together, and it's called a YRG workout, right? And I was like, wow, and I do the same thing, right? Every yoga move stretches a part of your body, right? It's not spiritual, it's not religious, it's none of that. The foundation of it is stretching the ligaments, right? Stretching the ligaments. And that's all it is, no matter what you do, whether are you working out your legs, your arms, whatever it is, you are stretching your body. You're moving muscles that you may not have moved for years or decades. Like, when's the last time you've stretched your toes, right? When's the last time you did that? So, I found that interesting. But when I was watching people who were doing yoga, there was always the laying of hands, right? They would touch certain parts of the body and then things would happen. And I was debating if I wanted to show, and I still might sometime down the road, just kind of show how people end up becoming um, possessed by something as soon as the laying of hands. Now, if the practice in general, like say yoga, like religion is really huge on this, be like, oh, you're going to get demon possessed. If that was the case, there would be no laying of hands, but there was always a laying of hands on the stomach, on the heart, and on the forehead, right? In yoga and in religion. Let me say that again. there was always the laying of hands on the stomach, on the chest, the heart, and on the middle of your forehead. The laying of hands, and it happens in the practice of yoga and in religion, right? Healing, and in yoga, healing, right? Releasing energy. I found that very fascinating, and I put two and two together. I'm like, hey, it is from the user and the receiver that something is happening energetically. There's something going on, right? I've talked about Daniel Adams before and how he uses the same practices of the laying of hands. But the thing with him, though, is that he knows he, I don't know what it is, but he allows these entities to kind of like a magnet just kind of come to him, and they kind of awaken themselves. But he does use the laying of hands of like, oh, hey, speak to me, right? Come out. So I really noticed that. But with the communication with these entities, really is quite interesting. And some are fake, some are real. Like I said, Daniel Adams is about the only one that I trust at the moment, but there's a lot of fakers showing up now, which that's a given, right? People want attention just to get noticed. And that's another key thing I'll be talking next video about, which I was going to do today, but I already had this ready from last night. So basically, when you are shaking someone's hand, you are making a contract, an obligation of some kind, aware or unaware, right? That's what I said, is that random people just would come to me and just want to shake my hand, whether it be strangers or if I was helping out somebody, they want to shake my hand. And Christ was like, no, don't do that. So I was like, all right, so what do I do? What do I do? So I decided to just do this. Just give them a pound, because it closes my fist into a fist, so then it protects my energy. Now there's still contact. But it's not a full contact, because your energy, your source of energy, comes from in here, and it can be directed out and it can flow in. So especially if it's a person who does witchcraft or is a warlock, they're going to end up knowing how to do this. And if that entity has possessed the vessel, right? Because all of us have some kind of deities within us, both good and bad, right? Because that's part of learning, right? If you're learning about love, you're going to have the spirit of love with you. If you learn about the spirit of truth, truth is going to be in you, right? It's in the Bible, right? The spirit of truth, spirit of love, spirit of lust, spirit of greed, they're all in there. They're all in there. And those entities are going to live and dwell within you. Now, if these entities like lust and greed have overcome you, and then there's other ones that even get deeper, like hypnosis, the hypnosis spirit, the dreamer spirit, right? The blindness spirit takes over your eyes. These entities take over you, right? You're just talking to an entity and not your soul that dwells within, right? Not saying 100%, but majority of people do have a soul, and that's the real them, right? But you can be possessed by different entities, right? Religion is a huge one. There's a religious spirit where it constantly is barking like a dog and is just very forceful on things. I was just observing preachers and pastors on the streets, and they just reminded me. That's what it reminded me of, is that dogs on the corner of the street just barking away, right? No compassion and no love was within, right? And I read on a Facebook thing today And this person was kind of pretty much saying the same thing, like, oh, God says he hates all these things, right? And you got to be 100% with God, otherwise he hates you, right? The basic mindset of that, and it's literally translated as God hates these things. And I was like, wow, that's not that's just more dividing, right? More dividing. And then you got the new age, right? Because I mingled in all this stuff, right? Because I was trying to figure it out. Basically, I was like a secret agent. Be like, all right, so my strength, my rock foundation is Christ, right? Born and raised in a Christian home, and Christ told me, hey, don't forget about me, but I'm going to teach you a lot of different things. I'm going to teach a lot of different things. You're going to become the observer. So I observe from the past, from being born and raised in a Christian home, the churches I've been into, the ones I've been kicked out of, what's happened with my parents. They were kicked out. And it was all because you couldn't be friends with somebody that was kicked out of the church in the first place. You kick out someone out of the church, you can't be friends with them, right? That's what happened to my parents. And that's what happened to me too, right? Guilty by association. I'm like, oh my God, that's not what Christ taught at all. You go into the New Age community, they're going to teach you a lot of interesting things, but it was the same thing. It was all like a selective tribe. Like you had to believe in a certain thing, or they would kick you out. And it was the same way with the religion communities, right? You'd have to know certain things, and the Bible was 100% literal, and it had to be that way, right? And it was just all these things you couldn't mix and match because it would confuse people. They didn't quite understand. So every time you talked about the Bible or Christ, New Age people would boot you out. But if you talk about dimensions and portals and energy work, Christianity would kick you out. So, or religion in general, right? Pretty much in the Christian circles, but the majority was there, and it was just very fascinating. So, I've just been on the study of like, oh hey, how can we bring everybody together um, as a whole? But I noticed, like I said, was all these spirits were involved, right? There was no love, there was no unity, there was no trust, nothing, because people had not learned their lessons from the spirits within them, whether they had past trauma, things of that nature. They didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to handle it. Um, so that's where these laying of hands come in, because it brings a lot of these contracts, a lot of these deities to the surface, so then you can uh, see what is going on within your being, within yourself, right? Um, that's been kind of the trial that I've been seeing with people, is that they don't know how to love themselves. They don't know how to respect themselves. They don't trust themselves. Key word. People do not trust themselves. It astonishes me and saddens me on how people don't know how to do that. But it's because you're conditioned to. In the religious communities, they teach you that you're nothing, that you mean nothing unless you have Christ in your life, right? Christ is your rock foundation. Christ is my rock foundation, but I still love myself. I respect myself. I learn a lot about things, right? Christ teaches me things as well as my guide, as my mentor. But I'm the one that's learning. I'm the one that's making the decisions, right? I am self-aware and observe that and identify that, right? I identify that I am doing things and I am creating a cause of it and an effect of it, right? And it's huge. It's huge to know that. But people are just kind of running with blinders on, just kind of just playing around in this game, playing around in this matrix, playing around with spirits and deities, making pacts and contracts all the time, man. It is literally crazy. It is it is bizarre. To me, anyways. But if you don't know, you don't know, right? Let me see here. I'm gonna go ahead and read this right here. This is from Psalms 107, 8 through 11. The anointed ones gave thanks to the creators for their love and wonderful deeds for Gaia and all life. For the anointed seed satisfies the spiritually thirsty and fills the hungry soul with energy, knowledge, and wisdom. The spiritually dead sit in darkness and confusion, Babylon, and become suffering prisoners of the world matrix beast system, in iron chains of deception and corruption. Let me say that again. The spiritually dead sit in darkness and confusion and become suffering prisoners of the world matrix beast system, in iron chains of deception and corruption, because they rebelled against the divine creator's laws and commands. The spiritually dead despised the plans of the divine creator. And I found that interesting, on how that was presented. And that's my interpretations of it, but it pretty much says the same thing. So again, that was Psalms 107, 8 through 11. And I found that real fascinating, to view things in that way, right? What does it mean to be spiritually alive, and what does it mean to be spiritually dead? Spiritually alive means that you are fully 100% awake, aware, you trust yourself, you love yourself, you're making decisions for your own, you have a stable foundation for yourself, and you've worked hard to maintain that. But there's others who live a harder way of life. Now that could be the lesson, right? That could be the lesson. I can only speak from my experience, because I grew up in a home where my parents argued about money all the time. All the time. Hey, how's it going, Alexis? They yelled all the time about money. That was like one of the main things I always remembered. And my mom tried so hard to make sure that we got presents for our birthday and Christmas, and they would just kind of just argue and go, "Wow, we got to do all this stuff." But my mom was the one that's paying the bills, so she obviously knew what she was doing. But there was just things that I just made sure I didn't do. I always made sure that I had a strong foundation, just like with my faith with Christ. I had a strong foundation. I made sure I had a strong foundation as I went in. My goal was never to use credit cards, right? And only use the cash that I earn, right? Only use the money I earn. Because if I had to go outside the money that I've earned, then that means I'm not spending wisely, right? I'm not spending wisely, because credit cards will get you in a place you don't want to be, right? They'll give you a couple months to pay it off, and you better pay it off a couple months, otherwise you're going to be screwed. So I learned that. I strategized that, and it was hard, right? Because there's a lot of things that I wanted to, this for my spiritual awakening, but still Christ was my foundation. And there's still things I wanted to buy, but I knew I couldn't buy it because I had to buy my food. And when I met my now wife, when we moved out, I had to strategize on paying rent and paying bills. And then, man, then when me and my wife got married, right, and we had our kid, well, no, we got married. We bought a house, and it was the hardest thing in the world for me, man. Hardest thing in the world. That's why my wife has things that she's good at, and then I have things I'm good at. So she's the one that took care of purchasing the houses that we purchased, and and that's where I'm grateful. And that's how you work together, right? We've had our ups and downs, but we work together. Um, Greetings from Australia, Alexis. Awesome. Hopefully everything's going good there. I've heard good things in Australia right now, so that's awesome. How's it going, Moody Star? So I just had to learn how to do that. But a thing I told my wife, right, but girlfriend at the time was like, hey, I don't share money. She's like, that's fine. I don't share money either. So we had a mutual agreement, a contract of how we're going to do things. And we both have been on that stronger foundation because I learned from my parents, right? I didn't want to bring the general curse of like arguing about money over into my generation, which would be with my kids, right? There's always going to be something you're going to argue about, complain about. There always is something, right? Nothing's perfect, and that's how we learn, and that's how we grow. And I think it's where a lot of people get frustrated, right? Is all of that because we absorb all of this stuff, right? A lot of negativity is out there. We absorb that. A lot of burdens, we absorb that. The stress of work, we absorb that too, man. You know, uh, we absorb all of these deities within our life. The spirit of burden, the spirit of stress, right? We absorb and have these within our lives. And it's so important to identify that because if there's something wrong, you need to identify that, right? There's a lot of things that I experience, but because I've been so in tune since 2010, it just continued to build into 2022. Man, time flies. Um, there's a lot of things that take place, from the alignment of planets, the stars, energy waves and bursts that we don't even understand, um, who we're connected to, all these energetic cords that we have with people, right? Um, we absorb all of these things consistently. If we think about somebody, it's because somebody has thrown. Just imagine a fishing pole. Someone has threw you a lifeline, and hooked you, and that's why you have a thought of them because they were either calling for help or something, and because you have a link with them, you sense it, you feel it. Their name comes up. It's like, phew, man, what's going on there? But you got to be aware of it because you got to cut those cords afterwards because otherwise you're going to start absorbing, especially if that person is going through stuff, right? Or they're having a hard time or here's another thing too. Let's see. Moody Star says, crazy. I've been aware of your channel since 2017. You really go deep with the knowledge you share. It's really appreciated. Oh, thank you. Wow. Yeah, time flies. It really does. Thanks for always tuning in. Um, but when you sleep with somebody, right? Um, Whether you're married or if you're just sleeping around, especially if you don't know somebody, you become one, right? This is stuff that we're not taught about, right? Marriage is when you join together. So if you're sleeping around, you're marrying a lot of people, and you're gonna have all of these spiritual cords attached to your spirit body, right? Your aura field, right? You're going to have all of these deities attached to you, all their burdens and pleasures and everything else. You're going to have thoughts, and you can download their parents' thoughts and everything else, right? You're going to get bombarded with all this stuff. And we're not taught this, right? And you wonder why a lot of people go crazy because they're sleeping around. They're downloading all these informations. They have these entities attached to them. And they don't know why things go a certain way. Oh man, my life is doing good until I slept with this person. Wow. See the connection? Slept with that person. Oh yeah, things then went downhill. That makes a lot of sense, right? You know, we're not taught these things. We're taught just to focus on the physical reality, but nothing else, right? That just goes back to what I said on here again, Psalms 107, 8 through 11. The spiritually dead sit in darkness and confusion and become suffering prisoners of the world matrix beast system in iron chains of deception and corruption because they rebelled against the divine creator's laws and commands. The spiritually dead despise the plans of the divine creator, right? They despise everything, right? They want to have perceived free will to do whatever they want, but they were not taught the cause of it and the effects of it. Hey, you can go sleep with that person, but you realize the cause that's going to happen and the effects of it afterwards, right? You're going to get 5 deities. You're going to sign a deal, right? With the laying of hands. You're going to sign a deal and marry 5 deities if you sleep with this person, right? People don't think about that. They're just like, okay, let's have some fun. Last couple minutes, whatever, right? And then you wake up the next day feeling like crap. You're like, oh man, something's not right. Something's wrong, right? Because we don't know how to identify that, right? Especially if you don't have any kind of spiritual connection at all, period, right? There's still people that I've talked to and am around that's never had an encounter with Christ, right? Never had a real encounter with the energy of Christ. All they have is the belief that they've learned about in the Bible, but they've never had an encounter. They never had an encounter with any other deities, right? They never had that, period. So if you tell somebody who's never even had an encounter that they're going to absorb these deities, they're going to think you're crazy, right? But you put it all together, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense in your life. I'm sure whoever's watching this is going, man, that makes a lot of sense. Be like, I never thought about it that way. Be like, yeah, I was with my wife or husband, and we had no contact with each other for a week or so because we've been so busy at work, and then you have that one time that the kids are at somebody else's house, and you have that, and you're both off work. You have that one time to become one, and then the next day, a couple days later, you start to have a cause and effect. Especially if your wife or husband doesn't have that spiritual connection, right? Things can go down. If your wife or husband's stressed and you're not aware of it, you're going to absorb that as well. But if you are spiritually aware, you can actually be like Christ, and that's where I'm probably going to get close to where I need to be. So how Christ said that he died for all of our sins, right? He absorbed all of our sins. Now think about that from what I just was talking about. We absorb through contact with people. We absorb people's burdens and pains, pleasures. If they're loving, we can absorb love, honesty, right? There's a lot of these things that you can absorb within your life, and you can also ease the burden off that person as well, right? That's the true laying of hands, is being just like Christ. Because Christ said what? Christ said there would be people who would do greater things than him, right? I probably should look that up real quick, because sometimes just saying those scriptures are like, where's that at in the Bible, man? Let me get it real quick. But I just found that very, very fascinating. Let's see. I'm trying to think how to say that. Um, we'll see what it goes. Let's see. Yeah, it's right here. John 14:12. Let me type that in here. Actually, I am on John 14. I always use the Bible gateway.com to do some quick references to the Bible. All right. 14:12. Make sure this is right here. All right. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth or walk with Christ, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall be done, because I go to my Father. Right? Just like what Christ said. You know, go through me to get to the Creator. You go within yourself to get to the Creator. Right? We all have the abilities of what Christ taught us, right? And I don't know all the viewers that watch me, but I would assume that my strength and foundation is with Christ. But I took that to heart, right? I took that to heart, and everything that Christ tells you, you can do as well, right? So we can absorb the burdens, but when we absorb these, we have to learn to release and surrender it, right? This is where it's like going to school. You have to study it. You're like, oh no, what do I do? I've absorbed 5 deities from this person. What do I do? What do I do? Right? So you have to learn to release and surrender. That's always been the biggest thing in church is the surrendering, right? Surrender everything out of you, right? Release, surrender. People don't know how to do that. It's easy to say it, but it's just to release the burdens, to make stuff come to the light, right? Because there's a lot of things that people hold on to, right? I'm guilty of this, right? I will hold on to a lot of things. I'm one of them people that will carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, right? Because I have so much heart and I care so much about people and just seeing the best of them. Hey, how's it going, that dude? Oh, thank you. But I see the best in people, and I want everybody to have a happy life, right? It hurts me, right, when people don't have a good life, right? It frustrates me when people make decisions that could be better, right? Especially when kids are involved, right? It drives me up the wall. Like, I want every child to have a beautiful, beautiful childhood, right? I've been around teenagers and kids who did not have good childhoods at all, right? I was I was in a amazing, amazing home when I was growing up, and my parents really took care of us, and my mom overprotective, but there's just a lot of love and respect and everything within that household. So I cherish those, but not everybody has that. So it's learning how to become a child again if you had that kind of trauma. But you got to be able to release everything. And like I said, I will carry the burdens on my shoulders, the ways of the world, because I want everybody to be happy, right? I want everybody to to learn how to heal themselves and fix themselves. We don't have a blueprint for that. I didn't have a blueprint for that. It wasn't until my awakening in 2010. I had a relationship with Christ since I can remember, before I even knew it was Christ, right? Um, in one of my videos, I talked about that. Um, that I just knew there was always this being there at like 2 or 3 years old that was always guiding me and protecting me. Went to church, and then learned about the story of Christ and put two and two together. Be like, oh man, Christ has been here the whole time. So I just adapted that and then just took to heart of Christ always being there and being my guide, my protector, and things of that nature, right? Um, so I was used to that. But then go out to the world and people don't have that. They don't know how to handle all of these things. And that's the biggest thing, right? Like I said, we are learning how to become Christ-like, right? We're going to do greater works than Christ because we got the internet. We got all of this information that's flowing through here, a lot of misinformation, um, which, like I said, I always feel like I carry the weight of the world because I have all of this information, and trying to share it is the hardest thing in the world, right? Um, just me talking for 35 minutes, I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of anything, right? Because you kind of have to explain and think of where people are at in this, because a lot of times, like I said, people haven't even had encounters with Christ or any other kind of angelic being of anything. So you tell somebody that there's contracts that they sign just from shaking a hand or hugging somebody or sleeping with somebody, they're gonna think you're crazy. Be like, man, what? Man, this guy's crazy, man. But if you observe your life, you'll be like, oh man, I think there is deities that have taken control. But we all have them in our lives, right? Because they're teaching us stuff. And then once we learn and we have fulfilled the contract, then we surrender it, right? The power of surrender, releasing the contract, releasing the deity back into the ethers, or if it was kind of a bad deity, like one that was causing you harm or um, lustful things or burdens of some kind. I was taught just imagine a black hole, and you just toss that contract, you toss the entity into the abyss, and you just obliterate it, put it in a microwave, explode it, whatever you want to do, right? Be creative in your meditation sessions, and that's what I did. I just threw them into the abyss. I'm like, I ain't sending this stuff to the ethers. Now, there's some things you can send to the ethers, um, like healing and love and things of that nature. Uh, but it's just strategizing things because we're all connected. We're all telepathically connected, right? Alexis, Moody Star, and that dude, you know, there was something for you here, right? There's something for you here. And that's what we have to pay attention to. What caused you to come here, and what effects are you going to have after this video is done, right? Identify these things because we have nobody else to turn to, right? We don't have a manual on how life works. We don't. So we have to identify things. That's why people bounce back and forth between religion and New Age, because there's a guidebook, is the Bible, right? And then in New Age, there's many guidebooks, but a lot of the guidebooks always end up being um, tarot cards and readings, right? And channeling, right? People listen to the channeling of, I am from the Galactic Federation of Light, or some other kind of a deity, right? So looking for validation and things of that nature. And it's good to find validation, right? Just like today, I was watching Rion with Unite the Collective, Team Light. I've been watching him since my awakening. Like, literally, like, I really relate with him a lot because we went through very similar situations. But there was a pattern I noticed because I had a dream last night. Um, I was at my work and in my dream, and somebody at my work was like, "Oh, hey, that'd be a cool tattoo on your hand." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, look at your hand. There's a dragon on your hand." And I was like, I was looking, I was like, oh yeah, you're right, there is a dragon. I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. He's like, yeah, you should tattoo it. He's like, I'm like, yeah, I probably should. It's already on there, huh? And when I woke up, I was like, man, a dragon, a dragon. Um, Fascinating, right? Because I've always said that's one of the things I learned with my awakening was about dragons, the protection of dragons, the ancient history of dragons on this planet, right? If you do some research, you'll find that there is a dragon statue in literally every region of the world, right? There is always some kind of dragon. It's very fascinating. But I was watching Rion uh, on his United Collective YouTube, and he was doing some tarot readings, and he was talking about the dragon, and that clicked. I'm like, dragon. I'm I'm glued in. I'm like, oh wow, here's some synchronicities going on here. And what he said, phew, just put the pieces of the puzzle together, because you'll be drawn in, right? Because whatever's taking place, right? Whether you want to be as simple as possible, be like, hey, God's guiding me this way, or like I say, Christ is guiding me this way, or the divine source is guiding me, right? Something is showing you things, right? Um, and that's the good things. Now, there's also deities that will take you away from your path, right? And that's where addictions come in, right? If addiction is there, it's going to overpower and keep you away from, hey, I could have watched Adam's video today, or Unite the Collective, or, you know, somebody else. I could have learned something instead of going into an addiction of some kind, right? So it's just being aware and observant um, as well, and just learning to release and let go. So I'm gonna cut this short. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. But a lot of times, people who watch my videos just kind of just want to listen, and that's okay, right? I like to listen as well. We're all learning and growing. There's some interesting things taking place. Um, I got some interesting writings that I'm doing to kind of explore further into things, because I've been I've been working really hard with what time I have in dissecting the Bible in a way that makes sense for everybody. Like, everything is in that Bible, and just like today, um, which I'll talk about next video. Let me see here. Let me pull this up real quick. Talking about dimensions. I don't think it's in. Is it in this one? It might be. Let me see. Yeah, right here. So John chapter 1, 1 through 3, right? Yeah. Don't let your heart be troubled. And these are my words, but it's still the same concepts. Don't let your heart be troubled. Discover the Creator within you and have faith. In the Creator's house, there are many dimensions, right? In my Father's house, there's many houses, but there's many layers, many dimensions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Go and prepare a dimension for yourself. Create a dimension for yourself. And if you go and prepare a dimension for you, you will return again and receive. I haven't worked it out all the way. And receive. Where I am, there you may be also, right? Where Christ is, you may be in that dimension as well. Where I go, you may end up in that dimension, or vice versa, right? There's many houses, many dimensions that we can travel to, right? It's not just limited to this vessel. And again, that's learning to take care of your vessel. So when you're absorbing everything, right, you gotta learn to release and let that stuff out of your vessel so you can create a dimension, right? You can bring people in the dimension with you. It's just very fascinating. Everything's very fascinating, man. I just love just to talk for days about all this stuff, and I'm really trying to figure out a way and how to do so in a short amount of time. 44 minutes. To me, I failed because that's a long time. But for anybody that is watching, this was for you, and hopefully you guys learned something from this. So, yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. Love yourself. Keep shining bright. Never stop learning. Continue to explore. Right. Find a strong foundation in the spirit realm. Right. Christ, my rock foundation. Find a strong guide to help you through this. If you've never had an encounter with Christ or an angelic being at all, you're going to have to start practicing praying and meditation. You have to. The best way is to get out into nature. You are going to have an encounter if you're in nature. 100%. Whether you go outside when the sun rises or when the sun sets, or even if the sun's just out, right? I've been going outside trying to as best I can every day, right? I've been on vacation, so I've been able to do it every day by trying to make sure I go outside and get some sunlight and energy and spend time in nature. Because when winter hits, man, you're going to have 3 months, at least I do, of not being outside, man. And it really, I feel everything just kind of just go a whole different direction, right? It's all about self-healing during the winter time. But during the summertime, man, it's all about absorbing energy, getting your power back, and learning from nature and everything else. Because you're going to get powerful downloads when you're out in nature. You're going to have encounters when you're out in nature. And I think that's one of the key things is get outside, right? Because you can pray and meditate in the house too. But I think when you go outside in nature, go camping, something, you will have some kind of encounter. I guarantee you. So I recommend doing that. Just find a way to open that dimension to discover something new and something different as well. So we'll talk about dimensions next video. Hopefully I can do one tomorrow. And then I got to go back to work. So woohoo. So anyways, love yourself. Keep shining bright. I'll talk to you all later. As soon as I turn this off here. So yeah.